everyone. This is Kate Stevens. Welcome back to another episode of the Omnichannel Marketer. I am super excited to have Gabi Lewis, co-founder of Magic Spoon, join us today. Hey, Gabi, how are you?
Hey, very well. Thank you for having me.
Thrilled to have you. So, Gabi, why don't we just start out with a little bit of your own personal background and then, how that led you to co-founding Magic Spoon?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in Scotland, came to the US to study at Brown University. I actually started my first business during my senior year there. That was called Exoprotein. And we were making protein bars with crickets, believe it or not. At the time, there was this notion that insect protein was incredibly sustainable, incredibly nutritionally dense. So it requires less feed, less water, less space to raise insects for protein. And my then roommate at college and I thought that was a fascinating idea. And that if we could convince Americans to adopt some amount of insect protein in their diet instead of traditional proteins, it could be beneficial for health and the environment. And so we created this line of protein bars incorporating cricket protein as this sort of interesting introductory vehicle to ease people into the idea of consuming insects as an alternative protein source. And we actually ran that business for 5 years. We raised several $1 million in capital from VCs, celebrities. We lived in Thailand for 6 months working a supply chain. Fascinating journey. And we eventually sold that brand to one of our suppliers about 5 years ago. And we wanted to stay in the food industry. We love food. Our lives revolve around food. And we wanted to have the opposite experience. And so whereas that business was something very obviously niche, we wanted to create a new company, a new category, and create a business that could scale to, 9 figures in a few years and create something mainstream. And so we were really just browsing the aisles of the grocery store and seeing what is lacking in innovation, what is something that is a huge category nobody's reinvented in a while. And when you're looking at the largest categories in the grocery store, you see soda, milk, and cereal. And you look at soda, there's endless companies doing probiotic soda, prebiotic soda, kombucha, non-alcoholic beverages, you name it. You look at milk, you've got every nut or seed you could imagine being milked. You have lab-grown milk, you have, everything. And then you look at cereal, at least a few years ago, and the aisle, and it is literally a whole aisle, which is pretty unique in the grocery store. That aisle looks the same as it did 40 years ago. And so we started asking people, why has nobody tried to do for cereal what they've done for, ice cream with Halo Top or candy with Smart Sweets or deodorant with Native, like name your category. And people would give us these very unsatisfying answers. They would say, oh, you'll never get shelf space because Kellogg's and Mills control the shelf. And we knew from our last business that if you create enough of a brand and some hype, retailers will come to you. So we didn't really buy that as an answer. Or they'd say to us, oh, nobody will ever pay more than $3 for a box of cereal. And again, we saw endless examples where people will pay more than the regular price if it's legitimately a better product. And so in the absence of any good reasons not to do it, we decided to see if it was possible to reinvent breakfast cereal and create the same taste and texture that everyone loves, but with upgraded ingredients and nutritionals. And so that's how Magic Spoon was born.
Amazing. Well, tell me a little bit more about Magic Spoon as a brand and, also curious on that journey. Why hasn't someone done this before? Or, what was there just really an underserved opportunity and, you guys have taken that first step forward.
Yeah, so as to why nobody had done it before, I think I think a lot of it came down to the nature of the category. Cereal is dominated by three large companies, and I think it's hard as a startup to get into it because you need to have scale. So unlike making a juice company or a protein bar company where you can make a recipe in your kitchen, you can create 100 of them, 1,000 of them in small scale, take it to a farmer's market, iterate. With breakfast cereal, you need an enormous machine. You need to make it for the first time at scale. So there's a barrier of entry for somebody who's an entrepreneur, an innovator with an idea. They can't just make a small amount of something and get feedback and then build from there. You have to really, in our case, raise real money, go to a large co-packer, produce hundreds of thousands of units or something to really get going. So I think that combined with the fact that there's just these large companies that weren't incentivized to innovate, combination of those two things are why nobody had done it before. Now, and we can talk about this later, there's several companies doing it, including the large companies which are now doing something similar. So that's why nobody was doing it. And as to like more specifically what it is, we have dozens of flavors of cereal that all look and taste like you remember. So we have a fruity cereal, a chocolate cereal, and they're all designed to have the exact taste and texture of your childhood favorite cereal. But they are 12 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, 3 grams or less of net carbs, gluten free, grain free, soy free, you name it, it ticks the box.
Which of those healthier components do you find that the consumer cares the most about?
It's evolving over time. I think at the beginning, when we started in 2019, that was the heyday of the keto diet. And so people were really into low carb, low net carbs. Still important to some degree, but I think that's now less important than low sugar. And I think if we started this business 10 years ago, it would have been high protein that was the most important thing.
Mm.
What we do is we try not to lean too much into any single nutritional claim, knowing that these things ebb and flow. And, it's a pendulum that swings back and forth. And, at one moment, fat's good. At one moment, fat's bad. No one really knows. Every nutritionist disagrees. I think what we believe is that protein is pretty good and sugar is pretty bad. And so those are the things we emphasize. And that might manifest itself at any given moment in keto being the diet du jour, or South Beach or Atkins or paleo or whatever it is. For us, we just try and stay focused on like the core principles, and we'll lean into certain diets more or less depending on the time as well.
So you said you started the brand in 2019. What was the first channel that you launched in? Obviously, pandemic timing coming shortly thereafter, I'm sure influenced some of that channel selection, but would love to, hear where you launched first.
Yes. So we launched direct to consumer. We raised our first investment actually from influencers. So before we launched, we raised $1 million. Half of it was from health and wellness influencers who invested, in some cases, $5, 10, $15,000 each. And when we launched, they all promoted. We gave them affiliate commission as well as them being investors in the business. And that enabled us to have a pretty amazing launch without leaning too hard into Facebook ads like your average direct to consumer company, for example. So for the first 2.5 years of our business, we were entirely direct to consumer. We then launched on Amazon in our third year. And then about a year ago, we launched into physical retail as well.
Talk to me about how you think about each of those channels and even kind of, the value each channel brings and how you thought about, segmenting those different launches.
We actually didn't intend to launch direct to consumer and stay that way. So our last business, we'd ran mostly direct to consumer. We knew a lot of the influencers. We knew, how to structure a really compelling affiliate program. We knew the building blocks to launch direct to consumer, but the plan was then to use that as a springboard to go into retail pretty quickly. And so our initial thought was that we would be in retail 6 months after launching. It ended up being 3.5 years after launching. And the reason was because we simply didn't need to go to retail. Direct to consumer for us was working so well. We were growing so quickly and attracting so many customers that we were very happy, thrilled just to stay focused on that, not even worry about this other stuff. And it wasn't from any blind faith in direct to consumer as the way that one should build their business. It was just because that's what we were doing and it was working. And so we stayed the course.
And and so then why did you ultimately move into Amazon and retail?
We realized we were sort of forcing the consumer into a behavior that wasn't very natural. Nobody wanted, I mean, some people wanted, but most people don't want to go to a different brand's website for every product they need for their home. And we realized we had to meet people where they were. And we realized that obviously most cereal in America is not bought on the internet, not even on Amazon. It's bought in physical retail stores. And so it was always the plan to eventually be everywhere that cereal is bought and sold. We just realized, a year and a half, 2 years ago that that time was coming.
So what does distribution currently look like? What are some of the retailers that you're in?
Today, we're in about 13,000 stores, which is up from 0 a year and a half ago. We're in Target, Walmart, Kroger, Albertsons, Sprouts.
Which of those retailers did you launch in first, and why was that, why was that the case?
We launched with Target, and there's a long history of Target partnering with formerly direct to consumer brands and launching them into retail, and they generally do a pretty good job at it. And so that was one of the reasons why we chose them, in addition to the fact that there's a high degree of overlap with their customer and our customer. So when we surveyed our customers previously, where do they shop? Target came up pretty near the top again and again. And so we had a sense that there was a nice overlap in the customer base, and they were also excited and willing to come to the table with offering us lots of marketing support in terms of end cap displays, waiving the usual fees, all that kind of stuff. And so they were just the natural choice for us.
Could you talk a little bit more about your transition from D2C to retail? And, you obviously have so many tools available to you, Meta being kind of a major one. It sounds like influencer is a, compelling portion of your strategy. How did you use those tools and or any new strategies as you've now earned 13,000 retailers? How are you using some of the more traditional D2C tools to make sure that you're successful in retail?
Yeah, it's funny. When we first launched in retail, we spent so much time trying to get smart and talking to every brand we could talk to about how exactly should we use these digital levers to drive retail velocity. And we spoke to every one of the brands that we'd spoken to a year and a half ago when we were deciding should we launch in Target or Walmart first. And not one of them had cracked the code. And the answer we generally got was like, keep on doing what you're doing, keep on running ads, and like that'll help retail. And they're just like, all you can do is just like keep spending on Facebook and that'll help retail. And I don't think we've got much smarter than that a year and a half in. We've run so many tests, and we've pulled all the levers and we've measured it all. And I guess, we've got a bit smarter than that. But what we've also learned at the end of the day is that nothing drives retail velocity like the right product at the right price, with the right placement and the right shelvings. And so actually what we've used our D2C knowledge for more than just pulling the levers to drive retail sales, right? So we have pulled the levers, right? We do use, our influencers, we use them in a different way than previously to drive retail velocity. We do it in a targeted way. We run different sort of ad campaigns. But more important than that, I think, is understanding exactly what are the products that we should take to retail. And so it's not as simple as, oh, our blueberry is the best selling direct to consumer. Let's take our blueberry flavor to Target. But actually looking at on D2C, we understand what on a landing page gets the most initial clicks. And maybe that's akin to getting taken off the shelf. What has the highest reviews? What has the highest repurchase rate? If someone comes in on one flavor, what are they more likely to buy next? And so using all of those insights to understand what are our first core four flavors for retail? What should the fifth be? We understand before we even pitch a fifth to Target what the cannibalization is going to be and the incrementality is going to be compared to the initial four, because we've seen that online. And so I think the insights are really, really valuable, and they de-risk us taking the wrong thing to retail, which can be really expensive, and it's a mistake a lot of brands make.
That makes a ton of sense. You're selling across D2C, Amazon, and a lot of different retailers. How do you think about maintaining a consistent brand relationship with your customer across all of those channels?
It's hard, and we think about it. I mean, it's hard even before you go to retail, right? Even maintaining consistent brand, running effective direct response Facebook ads with an organic social presence with email is hard. I think we try not to stress too much about being perfectly consistent everywhere. We have such a broad range of customers, so we want to be the healthy cereal for everyone, whether they're a parent, a workout fanatic, anyone in between. And so we do position our brand a little bit differently, even in terms of different ads we're running on a single channel. I think we look to packaging probably being like the single most important place, and cereals unique in that your packaging is not, just a tiny little product or an outer package. Cereal is a giant billboard that the product stays in and it gets to your table in and it's on the website in. And so that's the through line. And that's maybe the most important piece in maintaining consistency everywhere.
Mm. Did you need to adjust packaging at all when you were moving from D2C to retail?
We actually initially designed our packaging for retail because we believed that we were going to launch in retail faster. So we didn't completely redesign it. We made some tweaks. There have been little tweaks we've made over time, partly for retail, partly just learning about the customer. So we, at one point we switched the order of protein, carb, sugar as we learned what was more important to people. Early on, we actually only had protein and net carbs as the call out in the front. And that was again in the heyday of low carb dieting, keto dieting. Over time, sugar has become more important. So we added the sugar call out in the front. So I mean, little tweaks like that, which not so much for retail, more just like the evolution of the potential customer and the evolution of our brand, and an understanding that our second million customers is going to be different than our first million customers.
And as you expanded into this omni-channel brand, how would you define what omni-channel is?
I think omnichannel is just what most consumer businesses are and should be, right? So we were a direct to consumer brand early on, but I would have never defined us as a direct to consumer brand. Like I don't when
There's a
people
lot of lists that would define you, at least historically, as a
I know,
D2C
yeah.
brand.
Direct to consumer is like people use that as a business model in the early days. And for certain things, it was, right? There was a time where you could take any product and you could just direct to consumerify it by having the same product and cutting out the middleman. And Facebook was cheaper than the store, I guess, at that time. But the product was not innovative, right? So if you look at any of the classic D2C companies, they didn't really innovate on product. They just innovated by cutting out the store. I felt like we were doing so much more than that. And when someone would call us like a direct consumer brand, implying that our only innovation was selling online, like mildly offensive. Like we're so to me, our innovation was actually not about distribution at all. Our innovation was product.
Mm.
And so when I think of like what we did differently, what we're still doing differently, it's not about where we sell our product. It's not about direct to consumer at all. It's about the fact that we took cereal and we like made it without any cereal grains. We took cereal and we made it 10 times more protein, a tenth of the sugar. And so to me, that's what our company is. That's what our business model and our playbook is. We just happened to sell it online for the first couple of years. Now we're selling it everywhere. So in that sense, we were D2C. Now we're omnichannel. But I don't really think of any of that as that important for what our actual business is and what makes us
Hmm.
special.
Yep, that makes sense. So, D2C as a channel, not as a full business model, does give you, I mean, there's a ton of advantages. You have unbelievable amounts of data at your fingertips as you think about kind of a consumable product with repeat purchase rates. You're able to calculate those LTV to CACs. Have you brought any of the kind of data orientation that I'm sure that you approached your D2C channel to your other channels, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think having really robust, data capabilities and insights and bringing that to our retail partners is incredibly valuable. We're we're able to have conversations with our retailers about incrementality, for example, which is really exciting and important. So we know that in retail right now, we're 65% or more incremental to the category, which is kind of unheard of. And it speaks to the fact that our product is not the same as other cereals. So most people who are buying it, they were not buying other cereal. They're going to the aisle, they're buying our product. And so understanding how incremental we are, how different our customer is, and the larger point being just that we're bringing people back into the aisle that our cereal retail buyer has lost to other categories makes for a really, really compelling argument. And so, yeah, insights around that, as well as everything from flavors to repeat purchase cadence and using that to inform how we approach retail has been really valuable.
Could you dive a little bit deeper into what incrementality means and how you're able to provide that data to retailers?
Yeah, so incrementality means so we're 65% incremental. That means that 65% of the purchase is a magic spoon. would not have happened in the cereal aisle were it not for Magic Spoon. And so that could either be somebody who is not buying cereal at all, they didn't even go into the aisle, and they're buying Magic Spoon now on top of their grocery store basket. Or it could be someone that was buying a box of Fruit Loops or Lucky Charms or whatever, and now they're buying Magic Spoon as well. But it's purchases that would not have happened without the existence of Magic Spoon. There's no competitor in the aisle that they would have bought instead of us had we not existed. So that's really powerful because most retail buyers, when they're looking at what brands to put on their shelf, most of it is just switching around, right? If they put in Lucky Charms seasonal chocolate flavor rather than honey nut pumpkin or whatever it might be, like there's lots of similar products. People are just kind of picking and choosing amongst them. There are very few products they can put on shelf that will yield like truly extra incremental sales, but we can bring that. And so that's really compelling for them. And that's analysis we can do with them, right? Retailers will share data and we can help them kind of slice and dice that data and glean insights from it as well. You know, retailers in general they have access to all the data in the world, but they're really busy and they have dozens or more brands that they're working with. And so a lot of the time it's just like helping them pull out the insights that were already there or could have been found, or maybe they even know already, but they're just thinking about too many things. And so whether it's that or, you know, analyzing kind of like our fair share of aisles. So what are our sales relative to the number of placements we have, and using that data to convince them we deserve more shelf placements, all that kind of stuff it's easier to do if you've already got kind of data capabilities in house and you've built the muscle of gleaning insights and analysis. And so that's been really helpful.
What data do you not have access to that, if you could wave a magic wand that you'd like to kind of know for purposes of being an omnichannel brand?
I think there's a point past which in retail you don't get much data, right? So for us, we don't know as much about our consumer for our retail business, though we know about the purchaser. Whereas on D2C, we can obviously talk to them and we can understand. So, you know, for our D2C business, we understand not only who's buying it, but then we understand, are they feeding it to their whole family? Are they feeding it just them and their spouse? Are they buying it to their kids? Like all that kind of stuff. Retail, like some of that you can get at, but we're a little bit more blind there in retail. And so something that we're really interested in, that we're just beginning to get smart in because we're only a year into our retail journey, is what are all the differences between our retail consumer and our D2C consumer? And we're just starting to get into that now, but we'd love to get deeper and learn more.
Are you able to see any of those differences yet? Or are you still, that's kind of next step in what you're focused on?
It's next step. I mean, even just looking at our D2C consumers over time, though, it's been interesting to see how it evolves. So our consumers in the early days, and this may seem obvious, were far more niche diet consumers. They were somebody who found us through a fitness influencer and they were, low carb or fitness fanatics. Now our consumer is far more mainstream and they maybe have never even heard of the keto diet and they don't really care, but they want a cereal that is gluten-free or has less sugar or whatever it might be. And so our hypothesis is that that's similar now with our retail customers. And obviously it's going to be different in Sprouts compared to Walmart as well, but still lots of learnings to uncover.
You mentioned influencer. I mean, they were your first investors. They were, a really important part of kind of your initial go-to-market. How has that strategy changed with retail? You mentioned it being kind of targeted. Like, what exactly does that look like? And does influencer continue to be kind of a major portion of your marketing strategy?
In general, it's not as big of a part of our marketing strategy as it used to be. We used influencers as a springboard to launch, and we had a couple dozen of them, again, invest in the business, promote us in the early days, and continue to promote us. They moved the needle in a way that mattered a lot more at the time than it does now, right? So in month one, an influencer generating $5,000-$10,000 of sales, having 10 of them do that in your first couple of months is game changing
Huge.
for the business. Huge. Now it's not, right? So just by virtue of how much an individual influencer of a certain size can move the needle, it's less important for us now. The influencer landscape's also changed a lot. And so I think partly it's the landscape changing, partly it's we've already worked with a lot of the influencers that can actually successfully move the needle from a direct response perspective. For us now, it's less frequent that we can find an influencer that we can really justify investing in terms of upfront cash, and they will move the needle from a direct response, measurable perspective in a way that we can continue to invest in and justify. And that's true of influencer on, TikTok and Instagram stories, on YouTube, a little bit different on each platform, but it's broadly true that it's harder now for us to justify having influencer marketing be a large percentage of our marketing budget compared to 3 or 4 years ago. So that's just in general. As it relates to retail specifically, there's a couple of things we'll do. One, when we're working with an influencer in general, they'll no longer just say, go to magicspoon.com. They'll say, go to magicspoon.com, or you can find it on Amazon or your nearest Target, whatever it might be, right? That's simple. If we're trying to really drive sales into a particular retailer, we'll do things like shop alongs, which I'm sure all the listeners here have seen, where an influencer is like, hey, come with me to my local Sprouts and check out my favorite new products. And whoa, that was my bad influencer voice, but we'll do those sorts of videos, and those work quite well. We do those for the effect, but we also do those for the retail buyers, and they love to see that. And so when we're able to walk into a meeting with a retailer and show them the incrementality data, show them how confident we are in our choice of flavors, show them all of the data, and then also show them, hey, here's an awesome video of somebody like walking into your store, telling them to buy a Magic Spoon, coming down the aisle, and they can see there's thousands of likes and they can see comments, and maybe even there's a video going live that day that I can pull out in the meeting and show them, whoa, this just got posted right now. That's really, really compelling as well.
Makes a lot of sense. So where does the majority of your marketing budget go now that you are in 13,000 retailers and, you are this, fully omnichannel brand?
We still spend a large portion of our marketing on Meta. So our business is still majority direct to consumer.
What is
And
the, estimated breakdown?
right now it's probably like 60-40 online, offline. And, it's evolving over time. But because of that, our biggest channel is definitely still Meta, followed by podcast, influencer, and of course search as well. I think with retail, there's a limit to how much money you can put to work in a way that like really drives returns in a measurable way. So there's a limit to how much you can spend on shopper marketing and so forth. We're not yet at the scale where we're investing huge dollars into just pure brand building, awareness driving campaigns. And so in terms of where can we actually measure results and drive results, it's still largely Meta.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like to ask all of our guests about a topic that they feel, boldly or passionately about. So would love to ask you that.
Within business, or just
Anything.
I mean, my biggest passion and love is just food in general, which kind of led to this. So my entire life and a large part of my happiness revolves around eating delicious food with friends, discovering new restaurants.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what led to this. I think I get to think about food all day, every day with my business. And then I just have my business as well.
makes complete sense. Okay, lightning round. So just kind of a couple of quick questions. Favorite omni-channel brand?
Harry's.
Why?
I think they paved the way. They showed us kind of, they were a classic, 1.0 DTC brand with the classic model of not really innovating that much on product, honestly, but selling it on their site, cutting out the quote unquote middleman. And they've now quite nicely moved into retail, starting with Target, and then also launched other brands as well. And the founders were also just incredibly sharp as well.
What is something that you wish you could change about this industry?
I don't love how concentrated power is with retailers.
Mm,
When you're going to retail and you're working with big retailers, so much of your future is controlled by like
one
three
buyer.
people, let's say, or
Yeah.
one buyer with a given retailer. And it's tough. Like I've had meetings where, less so for this company and my last company, I had a meeting where a buyer literally said to me, oh, I'm vegetarian. I don't like this product. We're not going to take it. And it's like, should have nothing to do with whether you're a vegetarian or not. That's not how you make these decisions. And that's an exaggeration and like a rare case, but so much is swayed by one person's perspective or preferences, which can be really hard for small brands as well. So I'd love to see that be a little different.
Yeah, makes sense. Favorite podcast?
Oh, How I Built This.
Same. Such a classic founder podcast. Favorite newsletter?
Axios.
Favorite social media channel?
I don't honestly use social media that much. So
Really?
Yeah, personally.
Interesting. And then what about as a brand?
As a brand, I think Nugs did a really good job on TikTok in the early days. We followed them, got inspired by them. I think Olipop does a nice job as a brand, especially on TikTok as well.
Favorite book?
Let's go. I read Sapiens finally last month. That's top of mind.
What about?
Sort of like the history of humans.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that actually makes sense based on the title.
My dad has been telling me to read that for like 8 years, and I've just been like ignoring him because I'm just like, but I finally was like, okay, I'm going to read it. Quite good.
And then event that you're excited about going to in 2024?
Expo West in March, sort of largest natural food trade show, thousands of brands, always very fun.
Yeah, I'll be there. It's one of my favorites. Gabi, where can people connect with you?
They can discover more about the brand at magicspoon.com. I am on LinkedIn. I do have Instagram. It's Gab About Gabi. I use it probably once every 6 months. So there won't be much that's interesting there, but it does exist.
All right, but it sounds like the Magic Spoon content is probably the best place to go.
Yeah, and our Instagram is Magic Spoon Cereal.
Okay, awesome. Well, Gabi, thank you so much. Really enjoyed our conversation. It was great to connect.
Thank you.
If you liked this podcast, follow me and the Bridge page on LinkedIn and Twitter for hot takes and tactical advice. If you really loved today's episode, we'd love a review on the podcasting platform of your choice, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for listening.